Welcome to the Crazy Cool Family Podcast with Don and Suzanne Manning. Parents, what if we could give you the power to transform your family into something absolutely amazing?
A family where everyone is healthy, gets along, loves Jesus, and has great purpose in life.
Hey, let us flip your thinking to unlock the power God has given you to create your own Crazy Cool family. Hey parents, welcome to the Weekly Rethink. We are going to repeat a topic we did last week, and that is grades. And you think, oh, I can just turn this off. But no, don't do it. Don't turn it off. Stay with us. Because we were talking.
I was supposed to say we were talking to Macy, and she was like, "Oh, I would have said this, and I would have said that," and we're like, oh, "Okay, well, let's put her on a podcast and have her share those things."
But we've already talked about grades, and then we said, "No, we can talk about it more." But really, also parents, we got a lot of feedback from parents saying, "Hey, that's a great subject. You know, grades are a big deal, and especially for parents kids are getting a little older." So we wanted to give you grade expectations round 2 and talk about it with Macy. So welcome, Macy.
Thank you. Hello.
Macy is, last week we talked about how you have some kids that are more procrastinators or maybe don't care as much about grades, and you have to push them forward. Macy was on the other end. She was always really on top of her grades. We never had to do anything to motivate her. In fact, really we had to make sure if she made a bad grade, that it didn't crush her. And so Macy, just talk about, maybe start off talking just about how grades were a part of your life.
So grades, obviously as kids grow up, they're in elementary school, which I was homeschooled. And then when I hit 6th grade, I went into private school through the rest of middle school and graduated from high school from a private school. And I just remember growing up that grades were a part of life, an everyday part of life. It always felt like I was studying for a test or building a study guide to study for the test or reading material that would then be covered on a test at the end of the week. And so it really did feel like for the majority of my childhood and young years that I was being graded in every sense of the word. And so that was
I want to stop you right there because there was in your childhood, and I'm putting you on the spot here but I bet you remember this, and I bet you'll be able to tell us the math class that you were doing on your own.
Math tragedy.
Yeah, the math tragedy.
Early life.
And how that shaped you when you were a young child being homeschooled. Tell that story.
Yeah, so I was little, 4th grade.
I think it was 6th grade with Kelly, wasn't it? Or was it?
I don't know. I just remember my mom had a baby.
Oh, and it was before
life
it was before
crazy,
6th grade.
And I was doing all this math, this classical Christian curriculum math, and homeschool math. Yeah.
Online or just
it was
in
like
textbook?
a CD.
Okay, yeah.
And you would put the CD in, and this really ancient man would pop up on the computer screen. He'd talk to you in the most monotone voice. And so what I was supposed to do, which, empower your children, let them be independent, is I would watch the lesson. I'd have like 30 problems of homework. Sometimes I'd do even and odds. And then at the end of every week, I would take a quiz. But I was the one that graded all my homework, and I was the one that graded all my quizzes because Mom was like, here, you can do it. Here's the grade book. So I got smart. And
empowering or excuses? What would you call that? Enabling or?
And so I just kind of got smart, and I would just take my grade book into the study because no one was watching me do my math lessons, and I'd listen to the instructor but really I was just copying down the work. I would kind of work it out where I was kind of a genius actually, and I would make it look like I got the answer, and then I'd grade it, and every quiz I would get 1 or 2 wrong. I rarely ever made hundreds on my quizzes, and put it all in a folder. And so I remember towards the end of the year, it was a month before summer, this conviction just hit me like a wall of bricks, and I had 3 lessons left in math, 3 of those stinking old man videos. And I walked into my parents' room one night. Was I already crying, or was I pretty close to crying? I was
pretty sure she was crying.
I was probably crying. And I walked in and handed them the whole binder and just said, I've been cheating the whole year on my math and I don't know any of it. I think I probably had tried to take a quiz on my own and just really didn't do well or something. So I handed them the folder and confessed my cheating math problem to them.
And so, Macy, that's such a good topic, and I'm so glad you brought that up, cheating. And I want to...
The dad brought it up.
That's true. That is true. I'm so glad you did
not
that
one of
as a
my
child
points,
so we could
actually.
talk about it. What was your motivation behind doing that with math all year long? What made you copy the, work so hard, like you said, brilliant is what you said. What made you work so hard instead of just learning it? It's almost like you actually worked harder copying it than you would
Cheating
have.
is hard.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
And so do you know what your motivating factors were? I mean,
I think the first thought that popped in my head when you asked that was like, I wanted to be good enough. Like I didn't want to burden or bother anybody, that like I just couldn't do it. And so I remember, I guess, wanting to be good enough.
And kids run into that trap a lot, especially with the pressure of grades.
Right.
They don't think they can do it. Maybe the parents are too busy to help, or if they come to the parents, they think that they're going to get lectured or get reprimanded or whatever, and so they wind up.
Or they're trying to perform for you, parent. And they want to please you because you've got the bar set so high that they can't make it happen. And so, know that your children either have cheated or they will cheat. It is an opportunity that is presented to them. And I just remember at the school I was at, there was a whole underground network that the students worked with. I don't know if it was necessarily cheating as much as helping each other when it came to studying and Quizlets and all those different things. But when your child does get caught cheating, and you need to pray that they do get caught cheating, that's a perfect opportunity to press in and find out the why.
Yeah.
What is going on? Why? And for Macy, it was, I didn't want to fail. I didn't want to bother anybody. I didn't want to be. And so that's a great point.
Yeah, don't freak out, parents, when that happens, because it's a great opportunity to understand your child more and to get into the relationship.
Yeah, and I turned out fine.
Exactly. You haven't cheated on your taxes
Don't
yet,
act
right?
like it's the end of the world.
That's right.
I'm fine.
That's right.
Exactly. And I mean, and there are natural consequences. I think we made you redo the whole math
I
curriculum,
spent the
right?
whole summer doing math
redoing it. And so it's like if you do cheat, then the consequence
without the grade book.
I think I kept that.
Yeah.
Just kept the old man.
Yeah.
Round 2 of the
That
old
was
man.
punishment.
Okay, so Macy, what is another thing? You had mentioned something about teachers that helped you, that's one of the motivators that you had to make good grades.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you guys have kids like this, but if a perfectionist, which is what I probably would have called myself throughout all of school.
I called you that in the last podcast.
Thank you. Great. That's my identity. If you have a perfectionist student that's kind of self-empowered or self-motivated, they probably love school. I don't know if that's a logical connection to make, but I really loved school. I did love home, and I loved the years I was at home, but I loved being around my friends. I loved learning together and being challenged and seeing who got what on grades. I was never super competitive, but I was when it came to grades. I wanted to be the best.
And by the way, parents, out of our 7 kids, we've had 2 that are like that. 2 kids that loved school, Macy and then Molly, our oldest daughter. So, chances are if you have a couple of kids, 2 or 3 kids, you're going to have a kid that it's like that.
Yeah. And so I think when people look at me and they tilt their head and they weren't the kid that loved school, they're like, why? Why'd you love it so much? Like, what's wrong with you?
Something's wrong with you.
Yes. And it really did. What it came down to it was teachers. I had special relationships with several teachers growing up, men and women, not in any sort of weird way, really in like a mentor style. I really loved their teaching style or the way that they empowered us to learn or wanted us to learn. And one of my favorite things about teacher relationships is that the student orientations at the beginning of the year, my parents would go to them and they would come home and be like, oh my goodness, you have this teacher and he's amazing and he's a coach and he teaches history and you're just going to love him. He's so fun. And I just was like, okay, I'm going to it. It gave me an anticipation for it. And then throughout the year, if things got harder, I didn't really believe the best in my teacher because I thought I deserved an 85 and they gave me a 73. I could take it back to my parents and they were a safe place to be like, oh no, but your teacher's for you. Or, oh no, your teacher's like proud of you and loves you and wants you to learn. And it built this relationship of, it's not the parents and student versus the teacher. It's like the parents and the teacher both partnering together to be for the student. And I think that was a safe learning atmosphere for me.
Yeah, we just had that opportunity to do that with McCade, our youngest, because he switched schools. And so that's a really scary thing to switch schools. And so we went to the parent orientation and we just made it a point to come back and say, wow, we were so impressed with all of your teachers, to instill in them. So parents, what you learn from that is you have a role in helping your child to embrace their teachers. So, so often our parents are against the teachers and they are, we've got to fight for our kid because our teacher is messing them around. But in reality, you're teaching your kid also about authority, and they're going to get teachers that are good, and they're going to get. I remember Michael went through a season where he had a teacher that was very difficult, and it was hard. It was a hard year for him in elementary school, but still we had to support and have him go back every day and figure out how to deal with that teacher.
Oh, yeah, that's just parents know that you and the teacher are working together in your child's life. And so when you join the side, when you start bad-mouthing the teacher or joining the kid, or what you're doing is you're now enabling the child. Yeah. Instead of teaching the child to work under the parameters and of the authority that's been given to them. And so you can agree with them, that's terrible. I hate that. It's so, I know that you worked so hard and you felt like you deserved a better grade. And so then I would always point the kids back. You go talk to the teacher. That's your responsibility. Like Macy, on the front end, we encourage them to get to know your teacher. Even in college, go meet your professor, go to their hours, but look at them. I mean, like there was another thing in lower school, teach your children to have eye contact with the teacher while they're teaching. And so just share with that and practice it if you need to at the kitchen table. Okay, I'm the teacher. Now you're the teacher. And we look eye to eye to each other and just respect that authority figure in your child's life. And by all means, don't badmouth that teacher. Yeah. Don't even go in and fight for your kid's grade. Let your kid do that. Let your kid fight for what it is that he wants, the changes or whatever in the classroom. And then I just wanted to say one more thing, that what you're doing with that student-teacher relationship is you're teaching your children how to get along with their coworkers and their bosses and the people that God's going to put in their life later on in the future. And so this is just the ground level stuff that you're teaching them how to get along with people outside of family and friends.
Yeah, when you teach them when you freak out when a parent or when a teacher wrongs your child, guess what you're teaching your kid to do? Is do the same thing. So so
then your kid's going to do that with a police officer or any other,
or a boss or a whoever, a church leader. The list goes on. And so, Macy, you also talked about something that was really cool. I think parents need to hear about it. You said that, and really this is weird. This is kind of strange because you were very much perfectionist, very much wanted good grades, but you said, we helped you learn that grades didn't define you. So elaborate on that a little bit.
I went into school in the 6th grade, and I would say...
Meaning you were homeschooled before that?
Yes. And...
We didn't just start school.
Good luck. You're 12.
Honey, they'll teach you how to read and write. Don't worry.
You got to do something with your life.
I've been playing tennis for years before that or something.
Put this uniform on. Good luck. No, so I was homeschooled until 6th grade. I actually did 6th grade twice. I'm August birthday. And I really would say my childhood up until 6th grade was marked by trying to figure out who I was, and my insecurities felt like they were the biggest deal ever, and feeling all these things. I didn't really like myself, to be honest. And so going into school, it was this gearing up to be someone. And I remember going out for sports and not being very good at basketball yet, but being good at volleyball. And that was helpful, and finding friends my first year of school and just loving them and loving having close girlfriends that were like safe, that I could be friends with, I could trust. And I just remember it being a pretty defining season of my life to figure out who I was. And so as parents, you know, and as your kids probably display for you, they're just impressionable, and children are moldable and shapeable. And so my life was very much marked by my family, my parents, and my siblings helping me learn who I was. And so when it came to grades, specifically in lower school, middle school, I really cared, and even I would say to an extent compared with my older sisters what grades we got. And so it was a really helpful and really safe place for me to come home, and grades just didn't really matter. Hard work mattered, and good stewardship mattered more than a number on a page. And I just remember my mom and I having several conversations of me saying, I just did the best I knew how. I've never done school before, and I'm doing the best I can. And for whatever reason, I don't always remember her response, but every conversation I ended up having with her was like, that's enough. You're enough. And I remember at some point that track was laid in my head. I remember switching private schools in the 8th grade and taking my first round of tests as an 8th grader. I'd never been to this school before. It felt like a pretty big transition. And I got like all A's and 1B on one of these tests, on this first round of tests. And I was like, wow, this is so helpful and so great. But I'm still me. Like, I'm trying to figure out who I am. And for some reason, grades made a distinction in my brain from my identity. And grades, parents hear this, like grades don't define your kid's identity. Right. And so if you feel like that's all you're talking about with a kid and you're not touching on the other parts of their life, what you're probably communicating is grades are more important to me than your stewardship or your hard work or your like ability to make mistakes and bounce back. Like if all you're talking about is numbers and you're not touching the like character of who they are, I would challenge that, because grades never defined me. They only helped add to like who I was.
And you were talking about how with some of your friends, their identity was in their GPA.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely felt like a lot of parent-child relationships or parent-friend relationships growing up, that's what they would talk about. Like we would go over to people's houses and they'd be like, how was your AP history test? Or how was your English test? And that was the extent of the conversation I watched between parent and child. It wasn't, hey, how are you doing? You know,
how's your life?
Yeah, or how are you feeling about whatever? So I think that they were not only defined by it, but that's all they really touched on with their parents. It's the only way they like related to their parents in some ways.
Yeah, that's so good. And that brings up a practical question. Instead of parents asking, what did you make on the test? Ask, how did you feel about what you did? Or did you feel prepared? Do you feel like you studied enough? Do you feel like you gave your best effort? Because that's really the answer you want, because that's where they're going to say, hey, I didn't do my best. Okay, well, your grade's going to reflect it, you know?
I shouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, you shouldn't be surprised if you make, And so that's really, you really want to just know what they've done, not how they've performed or how they've invested, I guess.
And I think parents, it brings up another great point that how do you get your kids to have high standards without having their grades define them? And so I feel like as our kids grew up, they knew, and Madeline talked a little bit about this in the last podcast, that we expected them to make good grades. So there was an expectation of making good grades. And I think, it was because we expected, and to Suzanne's point, we expected their best effort.
Yeah.
And if they were smart kids, that we would put them in a safe environment. And so if they gave their best effort, most of the time they were going to make good grades. But sometimes that teacher doesn't explain things well, or sometimes they didn't study the right things, or sometimes maybe, to Macy's point, she did math instead of studied for the pop quiz and she made a 40 on it or whatever. And so those things are going to happen. That's the way I think you give high standards without the grades being their identity, is that you don't freak out over every little, we talk about a lot, instances versus trends. If your kids are making A's and B's or maybe straight A's or whatever, and then they make that 60 on a test, that's the time to go, hey, to Suzanne's point, did you do your best? Well, no, I didn't. Well, guess what?
We
Get
can
back-
tell.
Yeah, exactly. Get back
We
up.
see
Let's
that.
do it again. Yeah.
I think a story, if I can share it really quick,
Yeah.
one that leads all the way up into college. I took a geography class my freshman year. I was taking too many hours my first semester, and I was overwhelmed. And I called my mom there's only 3 tests in this geography class and a final. And I failed the first one. I think I made like a low 70. I think I made barely a B on the second one. And I walked out of the third one being like, I bombed it. I know I bombed it. I know there's no way. There's 100 questions. I know I didn't even get 20 of them right. And I remember calling my mom on the walk to the bus, and I was like, I failed. I failed my first college class. I'm not going to make it at A&M. And my mom was like, she goes, was it geography? And I was like, yeah. And she goes, honey, if you make a C in that, you're great. I made a D. That was her response. And I was just like,
And I'm a functioning contributing society
she
member.
was like, you will do far greater things in your life than just make a C in college. Like, it's okay. I wouldn't prefer it, but it just was I think it's such a good picture of grades don't define you. And I really was. I remember being on the phone and being like, I studied. I printed off every PowerPoint and highlighted it, went to every class. Like, I did everything. She was like, I made a D. You're great. You're great. And it's helpful. It's like, I just think it's helpful if parents can get out of the drama of the number or out of the drama of the lack of whatever character piece they're seeing right then. And you can zoom out and be like, man, I've made mistakes too. It's going to be okay. We're going to be okay. You're not going to crash and burn because of this one instance. There's like hope on the other side.
That's so good, Macy. And it makes me think of those parents that are struggling with their kids right now because their kids don't care. And it doesn't matter to them one bit. And that's where I just meet them in their mess. Meet them right there where they are and figure out what it's going to take to motivate them to want to do better.
Yeah.
I mean, and maybe it's just the classroom setting and they don't thrive in that kind of setting. And so maybe you need to think of a different, method of getting them educated. There's so many ways out there now. So
It's good.
All right.
that leads really to the next.
Quickly finishing up with the last point. We talked about how that doesn't define you, but yet you also said that school helped you understand the weight of your choices. It's kind of like created adversity to help you learn.
Yeah. I really think that grades, like I said, being graded what felt like every single day growing up really put into perspective the value of choices, the value of how I use my time, and the repercussions of using my time poorly. And so if we look at high school, I was involved in a lot. I was doing a lot. I loved all the friend groups I was in. I loved babysitting. I just loved doing things. But I would find myself in these time crunches where I spent the Friday night with the friends. I spent the whole Saturday sleeping in, watching TV shows, swimming, babysitting that night, spent Sunday morning at church, and I looked up and it was Sunday night and I hadn't touched any of my homework. And I was feeling the weight of, if I had just done a little bit on Friday and a little bit on Saturday, I wouldn't feel so heavy laden and burdened on Sunday, but I didn't. I'm sitting in the weight of my choices. And so to have a parent come in and be like, well, you should have been blah, 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 blah. You're like, oh, I know. I just gave myself that lecture in my head. I don't need it again. That it just really did help me define where to put my time and the value of it. And then I would watch it play out in the week. If Monday I had a pop quiz, I didn't get to spend Tuesday studying for my test. And if Tuesday I didn't study for my test, then Wednesday I wasn't ready for my paper that I turned in. And I would start to feel more and more frustrated with myself because I didn't know how to make good choices. But it's like I was in such a safe environment to fail that I had figured it out by the time I got to college, that I knew better how to spend my time and make good choices based off of it.
And so I remember that in parents, there's a real fine line here when you go in to help your kids because they're spinning out of control or when you rescue them. And I remember that I could see it in their eyes when their consequences of their actions had gotten beyond them and they felt like that they dug too deep of a hole and they couldn't get out. And so I would step in and I'd help them with a project, or I would help them study, or I would clean their room, or whatever it took to help their burden be be less of a burden.
Yeah.
But then there were other times, most of the time though, I let them swim and I let them get in over their heads and I let them even drown just a little bit so that they would learn, just like Macy shared.
Reset.
Yeah, learn the consequences of, oh, this is painful. It's pleasurable on the front end, but on the back end it's painful.
Yeah.
And that painful stuff, that comes back. That's your job, not finishing your projects. That's your housework. Not doing your laundry all week long makes the weekend a nightmare. I mean, and so let them learn those lessons anywhere they can. And if the school, if the classroom is a place to learn it, then embrace that and let them learn it. Don't rescue them every time.
Well, and I was just going to say, it sounds kind of cliche, but I liked who I was a whole lot better at the end of a work week when I had done it little by little. I didn't really like who I was when I spent my whole week frazzled. And so a really simple question, not in an accusatory way or a judgmental way, but parents just set this conversation of like, who do you want to be? You know, like if we're going to pretend like this is a work week or this is going to be helping you to do your job one day, then what kind of worker do you want to be? Do you want to be frustrated? Do you want to beat yourself up? Or what if we tried it this way? What if we just did it 10 minutes a day and just saw, do you like yourself better at the end of the week, going into the weekend or going into the week or whatever it is? I think it's a really easy way to foster character.
And so like ask the child, what do you call success? How do you see success? How do you define success? How do we get to success? What does success look like? Yeah. Is it 10 minutes a day or is it, anyway. Okay.
Man, a lot of great points here. And I know parents are freaking out going, oh my goodness, this seems so fluid. It just seems like we're not doing,
Give me the list.
How do we control this or whatever? Just remember, parents, you're training your child for the next level all the time. You're training your child. And so start it in grade school. Let them fail in grade school. Let them learn things on their own. Give them responsibility. Give them a little rope. And then you'll see it happen as they get into middle school, that they'll start taking more responsibility. They start loving learning. You're connecting them with your teachers. It's relational. You're teaching them how to do it. And I'll tell you guys, I would say that I probably check my kids' grades maybe once a month. Maybe. I mean, and because we don't really, they're self-sufficient, and we've worked hard at that in order to train them for life. So I know that's a little scary for you, but keep working.
I just want to say one more thing about checking grades is that in college you don't even have access to it. Like your kid has to give you permission. And so that's where you're training them to, is that it's time for them to get on their own.
And each step, grade school, middle school, high school is another step to prepare them on the way. So when they're in high school, and they ought to be doing it on their own. And you ought to be a coach in that point, not doing it for them. And so keep work on that. If you got younger parents, start working on it now. If you got, middle school parents, you start to work a little harder on it at this point. So questions, just email us, info@crazycoolfamily.com. We'd love to hear your comments on these last two Great Expectations podcasts, and go help your kids learn how to make good grades on their own. Go be crazy parents, crazycoolfamily.com.